Welcome to the May 23rd, 2024 Heartwork and Philosophy Guild meeting slash circle. And I would like to start the meeting by asking for a note taker. Thank you, Ben. And short of having theme music, which I think would be a great idea, I will move us to the Asana page, and we can go through our process. So, could I have, does anyone volunteer for a land acknowledgement? April, thank you.
I would like to acknowledge that I come to you from the ancestral lands and unceded territory of the Sislas Nation on the Sunshine Coast. And I want to acknowledge their generosity in opening up their lands that they have stewarded since time immemorial. And they have also opened up their community, not only to me, but to many other community members. And they have held out their hands in active partnership and allyship, and in specific reconciliation activities that have been very profound for our community, and they continue to do that. I appreciate the stewardship in there of the land, in that we are, as settlers, benefiting from their work, their culture, their residence in these areas that that has gone on, as I said, since since time began. I also want to recognize that and acknowledge that the Sechelt Nation and other local Indigenous groups have suffered on behalf of their work, and certainly have been disadvantaged by some of the contact that has happened with European settlers and colonial organizations. And they are actively working in recovery from that, and include opportunities for us to be part of that recovery as well. I want to acknowledge that the land was here before us, and the reason that we exist at all is the land, and that we are part of a web of life that includes all of our relations, from the smallest insect to the largest mammal, to the trees, the rocks, and the water. And with that, I just want to say that I work to understand my place as one of the relations, and I guess invite all of us to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, April. So as a check-in question, I would invite you to take a deep breath and let your roots reach way down into the ground. And we will do a circle to answer the question of if you were a tree, what kind of tree would you be? And the circle, as I see it, is Ben, April, and then me. And whenever you're ready, let us know what kind of tree you would be.
Hmm. Well, the thought that just came to me is it the quaking aspen that is cloned? So the entire forest is actually a single tree. Um, and I love, and even without that, I've always loved the trees with the delicate shimmering leaves, with the just the slightest breeze and everything just kind of twinkles. So I guess I would like to twinkle like a quaking aspen. Over to you, April.
Well, I would like to be a yew tree. In fact, I was standing outside my front door right by a yew tree not 3 minutes ago. And yew trees can be twisted and very gnarled. They're known as ironwood and have featured big in West Coast boating technology. And they have an incredible life force and a different foliage than many other trees. So they are distinctive. They have a particular use, and they grow slowly but strongly. And over to Roland.
I'm a big old sugar maple. That the trees from the land, the earth that made my body, born in Georgian Bay, and that's the soil that my body was made of. Um, Yep. And if there's a scientist out there who could tell me if there's any bit of that is left in my body now, having been away from that land for several decades now, that would be very interesting. So thanks for the check-in, and uh, just we'll go through the agreements quickly. Essentially, the agreements are what you need to be here and to be able to show up. And they're on the screen, and hearing them in a sound has a different effect. So I'm just going to read through them. We're all in this together. Uh, um, Ideas and suggestions are addressed to we and not you. We have choice, and choices have consequences. We lead with curiosity, kindness, patience, compassion, and gentleness, and I will add to ourselves as much as to others. We listen for understanding to ourselves as much as to others. We speak from the heart, what's true for you. We deal in both and, not in either or. Um, Having fun is important. Finding the humor is an efficient way of moving through discussions, and keeping it simple keeps it direct. The session is recorded and it'll be posted to YouTube. So if there's anything that's discussed today that you would like to have omitted, then you can let me or April know as the caretakers, and we will remove that from the recording. And so I open up to the circle to see if anyone has anything to add or have any questions or concerns. Over to you, Ben.
Nope, I'm good with it. Over to you, April.
And I'm good with it as well. Thank you.
Lovely. And again, just to go over the primary function of the Heartwork and Philosophy Guild, we think of this guild as the emotional heart of the Lifeboat Academy, where we create opportunities for people to develop deeper relationships with themselves and each other and all our relations on the farm, and ultimately that can't help but to carry out into the larger world. And that our main responsibilities, so when we're discussing today, we keep in mind that we're working at building and deepening internal relationships, at increasing and creating opportunities for conviviality and celebration, that we engage in what we're calling experimental spirituality, a way of relocalizing, reconnecting with land and all our relations that live with us, and re-indigenization, where part of that is personal healing and grief work, which is another way of accessing joy. And we are vibes watchers and witnesses for other meetings and activities to keep the lens on the emotional work that happens at the Lifeboat Academy. And part of that is being the keeper or knowledge keepers of the circle process and the agreements that we use in the Lifeboat Academy. Anything that anyone would like to add to that? Over to Ben.
Yeah, the one thing that I would like to add is lately I have been thinking a lot about the philosophy part of Heartwork and Philosophy. And I think that there's a concept in sociology called the habitus, which is through Habermas's work. And it's actually, I think I'm finally starting to fully appreciate the habitus, because when we talk about the being the vibes watcher and the kind of the emotional heart, um, that philosophy or worldview, it is emotional, the way we see the world. And so there's this both and about the habitus, that it is both emotion, but it's also it's what we can and can't see because of the cultural lenses that we've been conditioned with. And so when we're talking about that, developing the philosophy, I think in a very real way, we're talking about our ability to see the world in a different way. And so like that, it's not, philosophy tends to, we think of it as a kind of intellectual exercise. And I think that it's, for me, that it's that deeper understanding of philosophy, as in what are we perceiving, what are we seeing in, and what are we deluding ourselves, where are we deluding ourselves? So anyhow, that's really just kind of making the work that we're doing feel a bit richer and more sort of focused. So over to you, April.
Yeah, I think I've been thinking lately about philosophy too, and about worldview, and watching how my own worldview changes. And I was trained initially in my intellectual work in worldview and what that means, and culture and how that works. So it's never far from my thinking, I suppose, and I too have kind of turned it into the feeling as well as the thinking. So and always curious about other people's worldviews, but only really cognizant of my own. And so I've been practicing questions to ask other people in a non-intrusive way, so that they can stand with me to tell me what they see. And we kind of compare our views, and they are never the same. And over to Roland.
Um, that is all very interesting. And I was just wanted to note that as I was reading through the main responsibilities, I hitched on a few words and used them anyway. And it makes me wonder about what you were just saying about the philosophy um, aspect and finding space to be able to have discussions around things like the words that we're using, which represent the concepts that we are communicating and how those concepts are being communicated through the words that we're using. The meetings, these meetings, very rightfully so, I think, tend to be about um, the brass tacks or the practicalities of getting people together and etc. And I'm recognizing that we have very excitingly have the 6 conversations that are coming and scheduled. And we also are talking about I think we've pretty much adopted the Connect the Dots Club as a name, as an opportunity to have these deeper conversations. Um, so with knowing all of that is also talking about specifically talking about terms and concepts that we're using. Um, yeah, good, awesome. So I'm going to move on to where are we now? Um,
Agenda.
Agenda. Okay.
And as note taker, I want to quickly, if I can, explain a new best practice that I'm playing with Asana and Notes, because I don't want to get overly technical, but because the agenda is a recurring task, which means when you complete it, it duplicates a new one, and any subtasks also get duplicated. So if we have a working item in a subtask, it actually creates multiple copies of it, which can get really confusing in terms of finding notes. So what I've started to do is the hot link to, if it's a kind of a project level thing, the task doesn't get a subtask. It just gets a link in, I can't point to the screen, but you know where it says where your finger is. Um, and then if it's something that happens every meeting, like reports from other guilds or a closing round, then it goes in the subtask. So just a clarification.
Awesome. That sounds good. Thank you. Uh, all right. So in the agenda, we've got the Connect the Dots Club, dis furthering the discussion. There's the proposal. So going over the proposal, there's starting the conversation around the seasonal plan. Um, so the seasonal review. And part of that is starting to establish Heartwork and Philosophy badges. Does anyone have anything that they would like to add to the agenda today? Ben?
I don't. Over to you, April.
No, I don't. Thank you. Over to Roland.
Awesome. Okie dokie. So then we are at the Connect the Dots Club. And Ben, at some point, if we could look at, I was trying to figure out how to do exactly what you did earlier today and couldn't figure it out. So
Actually, hang on. I can demonstrate. All you need to do, I'll put any task at the bottom. If is it there? If you start typing with an @ sign, see if it shows up.
mm,
So then on mine, I'll try to find post. Oh, it's not showing. Yeah, if on mine, it actually, when I type that in @ and then host, it pulls up any of the tasks that are already um, uh, have that, start with that name. And
Okay.
then when I click it, it drops it in as a hot link.
Okay.
That's all you need to do.
Awesome. So I'm good. So I am good with the order. I would really like to get to the Connect the Dots Club. That's kind of an exciting project. So I'm going to go with my heart, and I would like to start with that. So I will. I'm seeing thumbs up from Ben. April, is there anything that you'd like to shift?
No, that's
No?
fine.
Awesome. So in theory, I should be able to click on the Connect the Dots Club, and it will bring us to the Connect the Dots Club.
Woohoo!
Uh, all right. May I request that someone else take the leads for this to start off this discussion?
I can.
Okay.
Um, so I'm going to propose that, gathering considerations, we've got the record there, but we've already, if we scroll down, we've started to boil it into something like a proposal. So let's just start with the proposal. Um, uh, Reminding ourselves, and also I think that this is something that has developed over time. I was, just as a quick aside, I was reading about Andy Wildman, who does the podcast with us, or whose podcast we are on. He is an advocate for living systems design, which kind of goes back to uh, Jeffrey Alexander. Is that his first name? Christopher Alexander, pattern language. And his whole version of how design happens is you start with kind of the big blobs, and then you come back and you start to fill in the details on the blobs, and that you kind of you sketch it in. And this is something that we have been sketching in for a while as we've refined our purpose and we've refined how we can go about that. So this is sort of the accretion of a number of different conversations. So in general, the purpose is to generate a reading list. I guess what we kind of fixed on was as a frame that the purpose of the Connect the Dots Club is really to develop what might be our first semester introduction to the Lifeboat Academy. And it could also do double duty as being the justification for what we're doing, like as in a lit review for a research proposal. And so the elements would be a short list of the main topics. So not necessarily the items on the reading list, but what are the different topics that we want to cover. Um, and thinking about each of those would be sort of a week or two in a seminar. And then what are the key points there that we would want to cover? What are the main texts? And then what are the additional readings? And that really we're focusing in on, I think maybe is sort of distinction from the 6 conversations, which is meant to be all guild members and all potential lifeboat builders. This is focused on people that have a deeper base, who not necessarily have a full view of everything, but have materials, have experience with a variety of materials, and that ultimately we want this list to be available for people that are coming in, but that the Connect the Dots Club is kind of graduate level, to use that lingo. And we talked about the way we want to do it, of dividing the work into a couple of phases, and there's a lot under phase 1 and then very little under phase 2 or 3, because phase 1 is, plan phase 2 and 3. But that really we're in the prep work where we are using the time while the 6 conversations are happening to figure out what we can do in advance. And that the main part that will begin, at a couple weeks after the 6 conversations. That's where we'll have the conversations about the materials, so we can talk about referencing our worldviews and terminology, and how we relatively rank different items. That'll happen in phase 2. And then phase 3 would be taking that and actually taking the list we come up with, of the reading list that we come up with, and doing something like the first seminar. So actually, that in terms of the experiment, phase 2 is sort of designing what that first semester seminar would look like. And then we would actually, run that seminar and see how it goes. So coming back then to phase 1, the prep work, we have talked about a number of different things some of the things that we could do in advance are brainstorming those topic areas, brainstorming people's favorite books and articles, and then thinking through that kind of what happens in phase 2. How do we sorry. How do we invite people in to the process? And then the next bullet point, what's the process, is really like, what do we do in phase 2? How do we have those conversations and get feedback? And then similarly, how do we roll it out? How do we invite people? Who do we invite in when? So we have some ideas in there, I guess, but that's where we are, is in actually doing some of the phase 1 prep work, I think. And we also have some lessons learned that we've captured at the bottom. The process gathering considerations brings together a lot quickly, and it might feel slow, but we like that, I guess, to keep in mind as we move forward. And the both and, that there's a time, part of the both and is there's a time to push, and there's a time you can't push rope, but you can push a stick. Maybe that's something like that. So that'd be my recap of where we are at that's my read on it. So back to you, Roland, or do we just keep going around?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, thoughts, reactions, questions. Over to you, April.
So do we have a timeline in mind for when we actually start the conversations about the whatever books or resources?
All we've said so far is 10 weeks while the 6 conversations are happening. They will be over July 16th.
Right.
So nothing more specific than that. And I will add that actually as part of the engagement plan.
I feel like we did talk about whether or not to stagger towards the end of the 6 conversations, that's when we would start the Connect the Dot Club. But that was just, I remember that as being a suggestion, but I don't think that we made any clear decision about when we would start them. But definitely in relation to the 6 conversations.
I have a note just above phase 2 that says, hopefully we can introduce the seminar at the last. Actually, that should change to the Connect the Dots Club. We can introduce the Connect the Dots Club at the last or second to last of the conversation. So I think that's what you're referencing. And I broke circle, I'm sorry. So I guess, where are we?
I did too, so it's still April. It was a question, so I was answering it. What?
So I'm the only virtuous one, is that right? In this
So
circle
far.
process?
That's right.
So far, we're trying to.
We both have to put $1 in the circle jar.
Okay, so part of our thinking was not to have too much on people's plates in terms of trying to do the 6 conversations and figure out the connecting the dots process and content at once. So we're trying to stagger for that reason in time. Are there other ways that we think that the 6 conversations will lead us into thinking differently about the connecting the dots? Or are we seeing it as a reinforcing activity?
I'm not breaking circle. You have to pass it or ask me. Okay.
I'm about to pass it to Rod.
Well, in fact, I was thinking if we think of the 6 conversations as being undergrad work and the Connect the Dots Club to be graduate work, then we could actually use the 6 conversations as an opportunity to start introducing people to the idea of the Connect the Dots Club. But I'm saying that I'm not proposing that people have to do the 6 conversations in order to participate in the Connect the Dots Club. I could see how that could potentially make sense if we want to have an ongoing what would you call that? That the 6 conversations would recycle, that they would be offered and then I could see that first do the 6 conversations, and then if you're interested in the or not. So I think basically I could see at least this first cycle through the 6 conversations as being a way of first letting people know that there is the Connect the Dots Club and that the 6 conversations is a way of leading people into the Connect the Dots Club. Over to you, Ben.
Well, I wasn't sure how to do notes here since we're kind of relating to different bits. So above the phases of work, I've added further considerations. And because I was trying to figure out where to put things, I may not have everything. So because I've caught up with, I think, April's comment, question and comment. When do we start? One thing is we don't want to overburden people. We can use 6 conversations to introduce the idea. And you had another part there, I think, Roland, about cycling the 6 conversations, and I just missed that. Can you
Yeah,
repeat that?
if this is a pilot program for the 6 conversations, does that mean that the 6 conversations will cycle back over several iterations? I was also talking about, are we thinking of this? I was considering the 6 conversations as being the equivalent to undergrad work or prerequisite, maybe would be a better way of saying it, a prerequisite to the Lifeboat Academy. And actually sort of you talking in like language about the 6 conversations and the Connect the Dot Club and maybe even other offerings of the Lifeboat Academy, that the prerequisite is the 6 conversations, and then through the 6 conversations we can talk about other things that if people want to go into the actual study of the Lifeboat Academy. Yeah. So was I just answering a question, or was that part of Circle? I think I was just answering it.
Well, yeah, it was. I was catching up on notes. That was. I kind of had to break circle to catch up on notes.
Okay. Well, it is to you.
Cool. And I agree. I like that, and I think to factor into that, there's going to be the start, which the first phase 2. I guess it's remembering phase 2 and phase 3 are different. So phase 2 is generating the reading list. And then phase 3 is inviting new students into that semester. So as the second time we do the 6 conversations, it will be a new freshman class. And, or, like it will be the prerequisite for a new freshman class. And when they come in, there will be a list, as opposed to right now, we have to generate the list. And so I think it's still useful as a framing. And it does make me think about the graduate seminars. When I was in grad school, oftentimes there were undergrads in graduate seminars, and they would have there's different expectations on how you engage, and the undergrads are basically reading the materials and doing a sort of a here's what I learned kind of paper, whereas the graduate students are expected to do something more. And this, I think, where we talked about grad students make a contribution to the field. So it could be that there's also like there's an expectation that grad students might be bringing in new materials, whereas undergrads are just assigned the reading, something like that. Just in the spirit of considerations. Over to you, April.
Yeah, that was sort of the sense that I got from our last discussion too. Yeah, and this will shift, since this is all the first time that we're doing this, and I think it'll start to make real sense, real developmental sense, after we've established a few, after we do the foundation. Really, we won't be bringing in the lumber to stick build the rest of the house until we see what the foundation looks like. Okay. Over to Roland.
I will endeavor to be the keeper of the process. We went right into questions and adding to the considerations. So at this point, what do we feel would be the best use of our time? There we go. There's the phrase. What's the best use of our time? Do we still have considerations to go through? Do we want to start to go through the proposal? Are those two things that sort of happen at the same time? And if it is two things that happen at the same time, do we want to have a more structured approach to looking at the proposal and adding to considerations as they come up? So I'm actually going to pass this on to my more experienced knowledge keepers. So Ben, what's your sense of this?
Great question, and thanks for being the process maven here.
Got a whip.
Yep, and it's very useful. And well, I mean, I'm thinking obviously, what can we do? The 6 conversations now have been scheduled and are in the process of being advertised and are, going to start happening. And so that gives us, I guess, the main questions for me. I think the more productive, the use of our time would be, when do we want to start? And I think I feel like a dog chasing its tail. When do we want to start? What do we think that will look like, that process will look like? And then what do we need to have it on, in place for that? I guess, what, it's the engagement under the phase 1 work is the sort of the engagement timeline. I think it might be really useful to think about, because if at step 2, we're going to ask people for blah, 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 then we need to know before we get there. So I think that might, well, one possibility I think would be working through that engagement timeline of what kinds of things happen when. I don't think there's a lot here. It's basically, do we want to run a poll or some other mechanism? What can we ask people for in advance? And what do we need to have in place for that? So with that, I'll pass over to April.
Yeah, I agree with what Ben said. I'm also wondering in all of this, when we have a proposal, at what point does anybody besides us need to deal with the proposal? Does this need to go to any other guilds or are there any other overlap areas that if we agree we do have a proposal and we know what's in there would be my questions. Over to Roland.
Well, I hmm. My sense is that we would not send a proposal to other guilds. Or if we do, so the whole purpose for the guilds is to avoid having everybody doing everything.
Yeah.
So is this something where we need what 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 kind of information are we looking for from other people who might not be part of this guild? So what would be the purpose of sending it to the other guilds? What's the information we're looking for that we feel like we don't have? And if there is something that we want to ask of the other guilds, how can we do that so that it doesn't feel like a burden, like so that it's not too much to ask? So so those are the questions that I have to that question. So over to Ben.
Yeah, I have a big ditto to that. And that's the reason why guilds have a domain and overlap. So we can identify where there is overlap with other guilds. So one area of overlap would be promotion, because that would be outreach. Um, uh, and I think this is a great question. And I think the other thing too is leaning into the process because the coordination circle is meant to do that. So when we bring up at the coordination circle, we have a proposal, here's the broad ideas of what we're thinking about. It's actually the job of the coordination circle to ensure that nobody else whoever needs to gets a kick at the can. So we can anticipate it. I think that's part of it, is being clear and anticipating it, but lean into the process. So I think for people that couldn't be at the meeting today, they get to provide feedback when we send out the email that says, here's what we're talking about. And then it goes to the coordination circle and they get to say, oh, actually, it occurs to me that you need to talk to so-and-so. And I do, so the areas where I think there might be potential overlap, one is for outreach and the other is, each guild might have something they want to contribute. So actually in the engagement, like what are the big topics? Finance and legal is going to think of different topics than Heartwork is, and then outreach is. So actually engaging the guilds, which I would say is actually not part of the proposal, it's part of the project, right? So it's not, it's inviting the other guilds. And I think we even have that in the notes. Yeah, we do. We have, as part of our engagement timeline, when do we engage other guilds? So those are my thoughts. Over to you, April.
So I'm now wondering about the prep under phase one. which is brainstorming potential topic areas and list of favorite books, etc., articles. Who's doing that brainstorming? Would it be the Heartwork and Philosophy Guild itself, and then to send the list for other people to contribute to? Yeah, I guess I'm just starting to think about the nitty-gritty now of who does what and in what sequence, I suppose. Over to Roland.
So I'm in terms of process, I'm wondering uh, if we can think of the questions that we have so that we can then all answer them. So it does if that makes any sense. I feel like there's some good questions coming up, and then the I feel like I need to answer them. So, but I want to feel like everyone is answering the questions. So I'm wondering, does that make sense in terms of a process? I mean, it's kind of considerations, but um, yeah. So facilitator types, does that make sense?
Is that over to me?
Yes.
Um, I am feeling go with the process. Like we have our lesson learned. Gathering considerations can feel clunky and slow, but in the end, what comes out is what we need. And I actually feel like let's just keep like part of the gathering considerations prompted you to say, but how are we using our time, which is getting us into some of these nitty-gritty questions. And I feel confident that if we just let the circle keep going, then we'll get to the point where we go, oh, so what we really want to do is blah. And so I feel like let's just kind of churn with the, sort of the confusion, the creative confusion of doing just letting the circle do its work and then hope, but before we get to the end, holding it back to, so what's our so what? That would be my proposal. Over to April.
That proposal sounds fine with me, and I'm starting to get the sense that we are moving towards something else. So over to Roland.
Okay. Over to Ben.
Well, I'm going to come back to April's question about how does the list actually get generated? And my thoughts are both and, because I think that no one likes a blank piece of paper. And but likewise, no one wants the sort of the finished product. So it seems like something where, well, and I guess the other thing too is there's a question of do we do topic areas? We could do what are the big things you need to know to build a lifeboat? And then what are the materials that support it? Or we could do what are your favorite books and articles and then cluster them and say, that they're similar but different processes. I think, especially given the 6 conversations happening, that what do we need to know at a topic level, and then we go down into those different areas, what are the resources in this topic feels better to me, but as a first pass. So I think that I think sequencing it should be iterative. That's my considerations are I think it needs to be iterative so that people can kind of join in different points. And so we don't want to overdo the first step so that there's an invitation. And it's still an open question from my mind about do we start with topics or readings, and how does that fit together? So over to you, April.
Well, my instinct is to go with getting out my favorite books and or articles. So I'm thinking about it. If I thought that came to me in an email and landed on my desk, especially if it landed on desk in a really busy day, I'd be more apt to answer my favorite books, because I can do that in probably 5 minutes off the top of my head, and then move on. But if you ask me what are the potential topic areas to, about lifeboat building and whatever, then all of a sudden it feels like quite a big and serious task, and needing me to go out and walk around in the woods for a while to figure that out. So I think just in terms of engaging people, the favorite book / article question is where I would start. Over to Roland.
I was wondering if they're creating even more interconnection. Would it be would it make sense to build something into each session of the 6 conversations that focuses on the topic, on the is it well, yeah, for each of the 6 conversations, using that as a focus to get to start to get suggestions for books and articles that people might already have, so that that could get transposed, so that there's also some sort of continuity between the 6 conversations and the Connect the Dot Club. So it's a little bit like what's your favorite book, but what's your favorite book or article pertaining to this conversation. And and hopefully that, because I think the one concern that I would have, it's a concern. Is it a consideration? What's the word? Anyway,
It doesn't matter.
around just asking what's your favorite book and article, is then whoever receives that information, the amount of processing time that would take. I don't know what that would look like. That's probably something to talk about. But if it's already something that's already matched with specific types of topics, that might help to lighten that load, and at the same time create sort of a narrative or a continuity between the different parts of getting into the Lifeboat Academy. A little bit like it's maybe thinking academically about it. So over to you, Ben.
I like both of your what both of you are saying. I think I agree. It's a lot easier just to kind of riff. And I was kind of worried about how easy it is to riff on your favorite article, because you could just get, oh, I like this one. But and I think that's okay because it's brainstorming, and it is easier, and it's also it it prompts, when somebody, I think a lot, if we could get this going on social media, um, one person saying my favorite book is this, is, oh, that reminds me of, and this one and this one. So it kind of is a self-perpetuating thing. And likewise, I think the using the 6 conversations, like it could be a follow-up on the conversation, given the great, well, there's 2 things that I was thinking. One is, I suspect all of us will be part of the 6 conversations. So part of our debriefing for Heartwork after each of the 6 conversations could be specifically, what are the topics that you heard, and or what are the books that kind, or what are the resources people actually referenced, or the topics. And so we're just kind of building, it's, no redundancy, right? We're actually just gleaning from those conversations what is relevant moving forward. So I love that idea of the continuity of really tying together. It's not like you do this and then that's done. You do this and then we build on it and we pull it out. So, and I think there's also wrapping into it's really, I can't, this is one of those things that if we could guarantee that we could actually get people to use some of these tools, it'd be really simple because there is, actually, we could do a Miro board or we could use Lumio. If we had the big long list, it could be as long as we want it to be. And then we say everyone gets 10 dots.
Yeah.
Put your 10 dots on your favorite books and then just let democracy sort that out, and it's not the final vote, I mean, it takes the big long list and it narrows it down to a short list, but it does it in a way that's still collaborative. So yeah, that kind of feels like that it feels like a process is emerging. And I think that there's still some details about where the brainstorming does it happen in one place? I'm thinking technically, like, is there one list or are we brainstorming on Facebook and in the 6 conversations and through email and then we compile it? Um, anyhow, I feel like there's outlines kind of emerging. So over to you, April.
Um, yeah. Uh, uh, we'll end up with a big long list of some kind if we do this right. If we have a short list, that probably just means that we got to prevail. And each of us got our 2 most favorite things on the list, and too bad everybody else. So we need to have long a list as possible, and whether that's a list. I mean, I think if we just ask people in a number of ways, what are your favorite books and articles? And it can relate to, I mean, we could ask them to respond somewhere else, but at the end of each conversation, we could just say, remember, we're running this project as well. And so make sure to look at Facebook or wherever and make sure that we have your, your favorites represented in our list. I also think that as soon as we get the list, the topic areas will start emerging, that they'll be thematic, and that they will just start popping out. And if we come up with topic areas that look strange, like rather than being something about what you would need with lifeboats or regenerating or whatever, if it's like, here's my favorite lists of kinds of bath towels that are in this book, and we're kind of gonna go, nah, don't think so. But that'll be pretty quick and obvious too, I believe, the sorting of that for irrelevancy. Although it could be interesting to ask the question of somebody that suggests something like that. Why is this relevant to a lifeboat? Are you sure we need bath towels in our lifeboat or whatever? But anyway, yeah, I think linking it to the conversations and then having a number of places for people to be able to respond, and that we look at all those places and put the list together in the end, and then have a chat about that. And it might be good to do at the end of the 6 conversation debrief. At least it'll get done then, and it's not like an extra thing. And yeah, I really hope we get a really long list. Over to Roland.
Well, I'm thinking about a few things. One of them is what are the different formats that we could use for voting? Because um, there's also a certain level of resistance to going and using another program. So would it be possible to actually just have an email poll? Or there's a way, isn't there, where people vote for what they're most interested in, and then it shows how many other people did anyway. Anyway, that's just a detail for thinking through how to reach people most simply. Um, I was also wondering if I feel like there are already some primary documents, like books and articles that we have been working with as members of the Lifeboat Academy for a while, that might be good to start with. So it's getting the list, and I think that's a great way of co-creating, like, um, and at the same time, we're not starting with a blank slate, but we're starting somewhere. And we already have documents that can be used for the Connect the Dots Club. And actually starting with with something like that. Like, for example, I will talk about the small farm futures, as potentially something to start with. Um, uh, so we would already have something to start,
Yeah.
and within the guild, it might be discussing what would be a good place to start, or a good document to start with, as something to launch into after the sixth conversation, something already prepared, and for people to bite into, or to be lured with. Uh, um, yeah. So do we already have materials that we feel are important? Or I know that we do. So what are the materials that we already have that we feel are important, and would want to include in the Connect the Dots Club? Um, in addition to new materials and getting people to volunteer their own materials. And it could also be very interesting to see where there's repetition, how many people are going to actually reference small farm futures, or how many people I know that there will already be people who will reference, the hospicing modernity. So, yeah. So also, and to you, Ben.
I feel like you might be confused. In my mind, there's a distinction because if I understand what you were saying correctly, you were saying to start the Connect the Dots Club, we might want to front load some of the things that we already know are important. I see a big step between, or a big difference between what happens in phase two and what happens in the seminar. So I think that phase two is more like I'm imagining phase two starts with here's the long list that we generated. Here's the short list that has a lot of redundancy, like that, people voted for. What, like April's saying, when we look at this, what are the topics that seem to be emerging? Like, how do these cluster? And having that conversation kind of coming up from the weeds of the individual articles and seeing the patterns and then going back into it. So I think that, and then what comes out of it is the first book that we read in the learning about lifeboats, Lifeboat 101. We agree in phase two. I think we have that conversation collectively about what's the first book that we would want to, introduce people to. Um, so yeah, I guess the way I'm seeing it is before the Connect the Dots Club, it is a variety of tools saying, what's your favorite book?
Yeah.
And something in there that sorts. So we do a variety of ways of getting people to suggest their favorite books and articles. And then we have a sorting process where I get what's the simplest technology that we can use. It's not actually the simplest technology, it's what's the easiest technology for people to use to be able to engage with it. And then that's going to give us raw material that actually is the start of the processing that happens in phase two. And I don't know if it's worth really talking too much about how, how much structure do we put on phase two? I guess that's my question. Um, Two questions, actually. How much pre-processing work does the guild do before the Connect the Dots Club? So that's one question. And then how much structure do we have in phase two? But I think I'm going to come back and say for phase one, what we do between now and then, I think we're really clear. We need to think of clever and a variety of clever ways of getting people to brainstorm their favorite books, and a simple way of then just giving people dots. And that's phase one, step one. And then phase one, step two is how much processing work does the guild do before phase two? Over to you, April.
That sounds right to me. Yeah, and I think there are some ways of doing this that aren't onerous, like the voting for whatever. And I think we should inject as much fun as we can into any of these steps. For what it's worth, over to Roland.
So my idea of shackles and punishment, I guess that would be a no-go. Hey,
Shaming, don't forget shaming, lots and
I
lots
was
of
thinking
shaming.
stock, where, because we're going to have produce that rots. What are we going to do with it? I thought anyway. All right, if you want to make it fun, we can make it fun. That would be fine. Um, and with that, I would like to bring us back to time. So it's a quarter after. And would it be appropriate to move into the what next and what are the actions and what can we do between now and the next meeting?
Yeah.
Over to Bennett.
Ja. Yeah, I think that it feels to me like it's clear. Let's get the brass tacks on how we start the gathering, because we can start to do that now, and we can start to tie that into the 6 conversations. And yeah, if we have a plan for that, then we can get that rolling. And then during our meetings, then we can be regrouping based on we're getting a lot, we're not getting a lot. This seems to work, that doesn't seem to work. So yeah, that would be my vote. In terms of next steps, let's actually think about how we initiate the brainstorming process. Over to you, April.
We've already sent out the invitations, right, for the 6 conversations, or sent out a blanket kind of an invitation that says, here's what we're doing.
We haven't sent the invitations. We've crafted the invitation. It hasn't actually gone out yet.
Great. Because I'm wondering if we could add in there, if it hasn't gone out, if we could say, and by the way, can you start thinking about what you would share with other people in terms of resources, books, or articles. For the good of the Lifeboat Academy kind of thing. If it's appropriate to add that in our initial invitation, just to start people thinking about it, and then reiterating each time that we meet about that. That's just a question. Over to Roland.
There's the part of what you just said, April, I wanted to tease out a little bit, which is also asking in the sessions themselves, and sort of, and maybe even asking in the first session, asking for recommendations for the topic of the second session or something along those lines. If you see what I mean. If you will people know what the different conversations are going to be beforehand?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah, they're
then,
all scheduled.
okay. So then at the end of session one, I'm sure that you'll be mentioning the topic name of session two. So like in the next session, we will be talking about the color blue. And
That I
okay,
just to clarify, the 6 conversations are not subject matter. They are a different. So like one is there's kind of self-reflection questions. So like one is dissent. What is it that keeps you from committing to this? So it's not really about like how do we make
okay.
food or
So
so,
the, the
yeah.
the 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 I guess the main point, I won't go into specifics. I was just trying to use an example. I won't go into specifics. Is there a way of get just leave it to you of mentioning at the end of the session for suggestions for books and articles in the following one, and then do that every for the every following session. Back to you, Ben.
Yeah, I think that would be very
Yeah.
cool. That would make, and I think that would be. I put, if you go up, I added the a section on next steps, and I think that is coordinating with the 6 conversations. But I think that's easily done, and it really is, just having that and anyhow, it seems, I think it's going to strengthen the 6 conversations because it's not just the conversation, it's saying, and here's where you can channel those thoughts that come after the conversation. And so actually starting to that, I think that's a great idea. I think for me, the biggest question I have is really about mechanics. Like, do we so we've got the 6 conversations and a way of engaging people through that. And I could easily see asking each of the guilds, like sending out an email that goes to each of the guilds, what are yours? Or we could have it as part of the newsletter. I don't think we get a lot of uptake on people respond, like clicking on things in the newsletter. Um, So yeah, I'm thinking, is it Facebook? Is it email? Is it, what are the actual, where does that conversation make sense? Actually, and that might be also coordinating with outreach. What makes the most sense for, we know the question we want to ask, which is what are your favorite books? And where are we likely to generate the most conversation around it? I
Yeah.
don't know the answer to that. Over to you, April.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's outreach should know some of that and know the easiest way to do that. Yeah, I really think having it in as many places as we can is good because it just starts to generate some buzz about this as well. I don't think I have any other thoughts. On to Roland.
Okay. I don't have any other thoughts either. I think my brain is emptied.
Oh, no.
So over to you, Ben.
Yeah, I feel like maybe all we really need to do at this point, I'm thinking about setting up like a Google Doc that's just the master spreadsheet, or either a spreadsheet or a document where we could just copy and paste anything that happens on Facebook, anything that happens in an email,
Yeah.
and then it's no matter what, here's our repository. And actually that we could um And maybe this is really just, I'm going to put it out there. If I know a lot of times with social media, there's a kind of artificial seeding. And, could the three of us agree that one of us will post a question to Facebook and 3 or 4 of us will answer to get the conversation going? And, just to see if we can get any uptake that way. Yeah, so I feel like in terms of a clear next step, establishing the one point, the single reference point where all of the suggestions go would be really useful. And I would volunteer to set that up if I got guidance on, is a spreadsheet worth it or just a doc? And, the advantage of the spreadsheet is if we want to, we can start to categorize and sort things. So I think I actually just talked myself into the spreadsheet, but it's harder to copy and paste with a spreadsheet, but that's trivial. And I could set that up. And then, maybe we just start playing with a couple different places, see what happens. Over to you, April.
Yes, I think that's a really good idea. It's really good to have a single reference point to be a repository, and we can sort. If we get 2,000 items from people because they have a lot of favorite things, or because they know a lot, or have some depth of knowledge in certain topic areas, then we will want to be able to sort somehow more easily than manually. And who knows how far this might go, or what else we might bring into this eventually. So something that has some capacity for that, I think, is great. And I think we should just start putting the question out there in whatever ways that outreach tells us is the best to do. And we have nothing to lose by doing that. And we'll see how, if and why people buy into this idea. And it can be the first of many times that we do this kind of brainstorming thing for a variety of reasons. We can have a process set up that we know that works pretty well, we can do quickly from that. That's my last word. Over to Roland.
All right. So who would like to, or who could prepare a description or a proposal for outreach for what we're asking of them?
I could. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sort of, it's in the notes.
Okay. Great, because I was starting to think about well, what are the questions to put out into social media, and what does that look like, and who prepares them, and who puts them out, and all of that, which are all outreach type questions, I think. Well, I'm probably figuring out the questions would be the Heartwork Guild that would figure it out, but it's the how do the questions go out that are outreach. So we have to figure out what the questions are, I guess, is what I'm saying. Right. So then is that something that we want to work, figuring out what the questions are, something that we want to work between now and the next Heartwork meeting, or is that what would that be better to do in a conversation like this at the next Heartwork meeting? Or where does that fit in? Over to you, Ben.
I think this is in the keep it simple. I don't know that we have to like craft question. I think there are lots of different ways of asking. The basic question is, there are lots of things that you need to know to build a lifeboat. What are your favorite books or articles that help build a lifeboat? What do you need to know to build a lifeboat? And what are the articles and books that talk, that help you understand that? And in all sorts of variations. And I think that the variation in the question is a good thing, not a bad thing. All we need is a list of books and articles.
Yeah.
And however you get that list, and then it will sort itself out. So, I think we could say, what's your favorite book on resilience? Or, what's your favorite book on regeneration? Or what's your favorite, I don't, I think it doesn't matter, kind of. Play fast and loose. But I'm coming back to April, what you were saying about let's think of this as a template for we often want to brainstorm. We want to engage people in brainstorming. This is our model. This is, our current form of how to do brainstorming. So, yeah, I think, and I think we can write that up in kind of, I think we have it in the notes, and as part of the note taking, I will try to crystallize what I think we are talking about as this is how we see this brainstorming process, and then we can bat that around a little bit. So over to you, April.
Well, aren't we collectively brilliant? That's my last word. Over to Roland.
Oh, are we at last words? Um, okay. I like what Ben was saying. And I don't know if I'm paraphrasing, but using social media doesn't always need to be fancy memes. And can we just get a group of people and have a group of different people agree to ask questions just on social media, using the Lifeboat group or whatever. Yeah. Over to you, Ben.
Yeah, I think yep. And I think aim, act, reflect, treat it like an experiment. Um, you know, pay a little bit of attention on, does Facebook book work better, or does email work better, or does a direct email or a bulk email work better? And yeah, so I think yeah, I think we can. I feel good enough for now, safe
Yes.
enough to try.
Cool.
Over to you, April.
Me too. I have the same feeling. And I guess I have to go in about 3 minutes. So I'm assuming we are wrapping up soon. Over to Roland.
Yeah, I think we've got everything we need. And thanks, Ben, for stepping up to prepare the proposal for the outreach group guild.
Mm,
So I think that's it.
cool.
Any last words? Lift your hand if there's anything you'd like to say.
April's right. We're smart.
Good night. Good luck. See you all.
Bye, y'all. See
Thank
you
you.
around.
Bye-bye.